Hi everyone. Here again. My name is Ali Ertürk. I want to make for you another demo for HDR, and my blog is artofhdr.com. And here I have a series of photos shot in Pacifica, California around February 2012. And I did 5 bracketing images for each shot. And you can see it's during the sunset, and I have this deck here with the water moving in the foreground and some rocks. So I would like to demo you the HDR from this 5 bracketed series, and I would like to use Nik software, the new release FX Pro 2, HDR FX Pro 2. So to proceed to make HDR, select your images that you want to do the HDR. So these are the 5. They belong together. They're from the same series of shots. Choose them and then right-click, export, then HDR FX Pro 2. It will convert them into TIFF and then merge, and will give us the first screen to proceed. And in this first screen selection of HDR Pro, there is these 2 options, and I keep alignment, chromatic aberration checked, and really don't play with them much, but I play around with the ghost reduction. Here with the ghost reduction, you can choose the source of the moving objects. Here the water is moving, the rest is stable. So if I choose a source here, and if the water movement you see, it will change. All these ones will come from the selected one, because we choose strength as 100%. If we choose lower, then it will blend, so it will take around 40% and then merge with the rest. So I would use 100% and just check which one looks good to me. Let's look at this one. I usually choose one of the brighter ones, not very dark one, not the most bright one, the one close to the midline, close to 0, maybe one of these 3. That looks good actually. There's this water moving up, which can give us a good effect. So probably I will choose that one. So let's get this one, 100%, and we have this reflection in the water moving back. Let's say create HDR. And it will move to the second area for HDR FX Pro. And there, what we will do first is choose from the presets. So HDR image is already almost ready to be further processed. So this is the initial image. And from the left menu, we have all presets 28. You can see listed. We can choose one to start, and I feel already there is pretty good ones here. Usually I go for deep 2 or one of the initial ones, and then further manipulate the tones here. So you can just check a couple of them. This looks too dull, too bright. The brightness of course can be decreased. Structurized, too much structure. Let's go and either choose the default, or I think I like usually the deep. It has a bit vignetting around. Maybe I will go with this one and then move from here. So we choose tone compression. Let's increase this method strength. Actually, I'm not really happy with this one. Alright, it doesn't look so good. Let's move with the deep 2. So already we have the adjustments, and this depth looks good. And if you want to know what they do, is just move them the high and the low position. And here is the details, too much details, too low details, and let's choose something in between. This part is improved, but still what I don't like is that you cannot really choose something in between. there's too much jump from point to point. So I hope they will improve this, and that would be, they should allow us to choose finer here. Drama, again, you can just play around and to see. Actually, this looked pretty good. I like this drama and every contrast, everything came. Just it became a little bit too bright, and there's this noise also coming. We will deal with it later. And let's see the exposure. If we decrease it, how does it look? Actually, we cannot decrease it too much, but maybe a little bit the highlights. Decrease. That was also too much. I think I will just keep it the same contrast. Let's play around with the contrast. Too much. That is too low. Yeah, around a little bit contrast. Blacks. If you go to the left, it will increase. If you go to the right, it will decrease the blacks. And the whites the same. And structure, it's kind of bring the structures more. If you bring it to the right, there will be more structure in the photo. And we have the color adjustment, the saturation, and then of course, the temperature adjustments. This is too saturated. There's too much blues popping up in the sky. So what I'm gonna do is try to find a good spot for everything. Some saturation I will have, and it seems that changing the colors to the maybe a little bit. Maybe let's keep it still yellow sky. Somehow it is too strong effect. So it doesn't zero like this. So let's get them to zero. I will. I'm not really happy with these adjustments. Actually, I will do them in Lightroom later. I think this is important. Advantages over Photomatics is having this control point. That means you can do local changes. Let's say I want to increase the brightness here, the water. You just click there, control point, then you can expand the affecting area and then increase the exposure here. And then this area will be brighter. So that was too bright. Let's decrease it, and maybe a little bit you can give contrast and saturation. Maybe one click more. And then you can hold Alt key and then duplicate this one and then get a couple of other parts that you want to highlight. So like this area looks interesting, and maybe a little bit to the left too. That looks already pretty good. So by doing so, you can get adjustment, local brightness, contrast, which normally I do in Photoshop. But if you don't have Photoshop or Lightroom, if you want to just finish your everything with Nik, an HDR software, probably HDR EFEX PRO 2 from Nik is to go, the way to go for you. But if you have Photoshop and wanna further manipulate the HDR photo afterwards, I would use Photomatics plus Lightroom and Photoshop. Of course, we can also use Photoshop on Nik software results, but at least it has some options that will decrease the need for Photoshop or Lightroom. So I'm kind of happy with this at the moment, so I will just save it and go back to Lightroom, and then I will further process my photo in Lightroom, afterwards in Photoshop. That's my typical workflow. So now it is here. You can see it's already looking much better than the rest. Here the sky is not shown in the very bright one. In the dark one, the foreground is gone. Now with HDR, we have everything together. In the Lightroom, go to Develop menu. Then we will do a few adjustments here, but most of the adjustments I will prefer to do in Photoshop if you have Photoshop. We can check the white balance again. Water should look white. I just click and it looks like a better white balance now. You can click, let's close this panel and we don't need this one. And you can click Y on the keyboard. That will show you before and after. So we can, let's say, put more blues inside. Actually, I want to get the sky blue, more blue than complete yellow. That doesn't look so good. So maybe even I will go to other direction to have more yellow. So we can, yellow is not really best color for the yellow orange is not the best color for the sky. You would like to ideally have some reddish clouds and kind of orange altogether, but here is everything almost looks yellowish, and also the clouds are not the greatest, so we don't have much of chance. Just get a white balance regular, click Y again to go back, and so exposure contrast, I really don't need here more of those. Already exposure looks good. If I click one more, it makes it pretty bright. So let's keep it like this. So highlights, so you can see by clicking, coming here, show highlights clipping. So that means those parts are saturated. And here that means these now blue areas, they are complete black, complete white here, complete black here. So it's good range. We have from complete black to complete white, all range of lights. That is good. And you can just play around a little bit with shadows and highlights to increase the contrast. So you can see now I decrease the shadows. Shadows are darker, highlights are lighter, brighter. The contrast is increased. You can see from left to right. Let's click Z to zoom in. And actually I will get the zoom to 1 to 2. So now we can scroll around and see the improvements. Looks pretty good. I'm just a bit disturbed this blackness of the water. I just want to try to decrease this with opening the blacks a little bit to the right. Let's click that. And then, okay, so that was before. And now if I open the blacks a little bit, 100% is maybe too much. The contrast is decreasing, maybe around 50%. So that is slightly better. Clarity, it will again bring like structures in. So we already brought a lot of structure from Nik software. I wouldn't really put for this photo too much. Maybe one touch, one click. You can click Y and then Z to zoom in and look at the structure here. Clarity back and clarity to 14. So it increases the sharpness. That's good. And Z back to the zoom and Y only the after image. So vibrance, so brings in color. You can bring a touch of colors and touch of saturation. So you can see the saturation increase. Now we have this kind of artificial blue in the water. What I'm going to do is go to this part where we deal individual colors, go to saturation, and then I will decrease the saturation for blues because I have the blue only almost here, but not much in the sky. So you can see just decreasing the blues didn't change much in the sky. But the water get it better. So, and you can also give some brightness to these areas, losing the saturation, losing the color, so they will look better. So again, Y, so you can see now the blues are gone. And here we have this halos. Do we have any chromatic aberration? I don't see these lines would disturb me. I don't see much of it. These halos can be dealt in Photoshop, but so here we have for chromatic aberration. Still, let's click it if there is any. It can be removed, and lens correction part. So I just, if there is strong chromatic aberration, I use this part, but I don't actually have any in this, but still I keep it. So what I did actually after clarity, vibrance, saturation, I just manipulated individual color blue here, then checked if I have any chromatic aberration. I clicked it, and I didn't have much, but still I clicked it in case some details here that I don't see. And noise actually can be reduced here using noise reduction, because Lightroom is pretty good noise reduction function. I don't exaggerate it, so I keep maybe 25, 35 around, and so you can see. Let's compare now before and after. You can see the noise is pretty much decreased. So here you can see kind of softer. First, this makes images a bit softer, and then I like the effect actually is given by this noise reduction. Some very sharp details are gone, which we have a lot in this picture. Therefore, we can just increase it to make it a little bit actually less sharpy looking details. And then we get the sky pretty smooth. And then you can see I really get a much better sky with in terms of noise. And also the water looks now more like smooth, and then yeah, I like this effect. And then also you can give here sharpening, but I'm gonna, if you don't have Photoshop, just give it here some sharpening. You can see, let's say zoom in with Y to compare and Z to zoom in. So back to 0, and you can focus here, and then maybe 75 around. It looks pretty good, but I'm gonna do this still in Photoshop where I have a lot of options. You know, another thing you can do here, you can selectively sharpen. You can hold the, let's choose only the last our photo and zoom back. You can hold the Alt key and then increase the radius, and this will give us the parts that is being sharpened. For instance, if I do details, so it will give us less. And if I use masking, now the black areas are not sharpened, but the whites are sharpened. So let's compare what we get. Pretty good sharpening overall. So it's pretty good. You can see surface is improved. So let's keep it like this. Also, if you compare the stones, you can see it's nice. I mean, almost no need of Photoshop sharpening. So I'm happy with the Lightroom adjustment. At this point, probably this image is already pretty close to the finish version, but I still want to do some post-processing in Photoshop. Right click, go to edit in Photoshop. So choose the first one, edit a copy with Lightroom adjustment, that it keeps all these adjustments that we did. It brings them to Photoshop, and we will further manipulate the image in Photoshop. In Photoshop, what I like is that we are able to do local adjustments. So I use dodge and burn a lot, and that is then I can adjust locally, bring in some contrast and lights at different levels. So I don't need this one. Let's zoom into full, and we still use the trial version. Okay, so my typical workflow in Photoshop still go to levels, click auto, and see what it does. Somehow Photoshop 6 makes it too bright, which I don't like. What I do is I try to decrease the opacity to get something nicer, but it's not as good as CS5. Um, Indeed, I want to open this image maybe only in CS5, but it didn't give me the option. So in Lightroom, let's check it again. Right click, edit in other application. Yeah, there's options. So um, sorry, let's go back here. Okay, close this one. No, I'm not going to say. I'm going to close CS6, right click, edit, and let's say edit in other application. So it doesn't give us other options. Somehow open. I'm sure there is a way of opening this, but okay, I'm not going to spend time here. I will check this later. Hopefully, in another demo, we will have it. So, okay, again, we are here with the edited image from Lightroom. Let's use CS6. Continue to use it. It creates immediately a new image, and we will be now continuing to manipulate it. So fit to screen, continue the trial. The levels didn't give me. Let's move to the curve. I make usually an S curve to improve the contrast slightly. We can see, I think it brought in a lot of contrast already. I will keep it. And then I go last brightness contrast. I really don't need any more brightness. It's pretty bright. So if you want one touch, and then contrast maybe a little bit, and see a little bit more contrast here in the water and so on. I'm gonna keep it. So I merge these layers now. So you can choose all of them with shift click, then click Ctrl E. It will merge. Now I will move to touch and burn. For this, I will duplicate the background layer, Ctrl J, and then go from the tool menus and then choose touch and burn. Actually, I'm using a lot sponge to resend it to you. Let's choose first maybe the burn, so we already have a lot of bright areas. So we can just create a little bit more local contrast by darkening some parts in the water, and overall it's really a lot of brightness, so we don't want to our eyes get distracted. Like all this water here should not be so bright. It's okay if we have the brightness here and through the middle part. The sides we just don't need much of brightness. We can just decrease it. And here, so just I'm trying to create some local contrast in the sky, so we can check it, some parts. And then let's use the Dutch to lighten some areas. So as I said, pretty much pretty light everywhere, but still let's highlight this splash here, a little bit this side of the water. So you can just decrease the size of your brush with bracket and keys meanwhile that you fit to the area that you want to highlight. Maybe a little bit to the rocks, some of the rocks, to highlight them more, and the foreground sand here, this area I like. I think we have pretty good improvement. Let's try to bring in some color contrast with sponge tool. Actually, I desaturated Control Z, choose here saturate first, and we may do some desaturation. I will just bring in here some contrast to this yellowish area, and maybe here this water yellows, and a little bit more yellows here to the sky. And the blue, we don't have much of it actually, so let's exaggerate the yellows a little bit. I really didn't like this sky dull looking, but with the yellow improvements maybe we can get better, and we can also increase the saturation. Let's go to desaturate and then remove the parts that we really exaggerate, or the one parts that we don't want. Here too much, I think here is a bit too much, and here these dark sides, let's remove them. And I think it's okay looking to me now. Let's check. So this is improvement with touch, burn, and sponge tool. Without it and with it. Without, with. So you can see we have a better focus point through the middle, and more color. Actually, I want to increase the focus by darkening more the picture. So let's do more burning at the edges all around this here. It's really too much for eyes. It's too much to look, and we don't want. And we can increase the exposure strength a little bit more. It darkens faster. So just keep it. Let's keep it to this, the brightness like this through the midline. So that our eyes would have some focus like this. Is kind of too much to look. So we don't want to get distracted too much. So let's just darken maybe this area. We don't really need the most of the rocks. Just a few of them in the foreground is okay. A little bit more. Good. Here a little bit more. And through the sides a little bit. The corners. Okay. So here. So let's check it again. Before, after. So our eyes has now really better focus. All these parts are gone. If action is going through one hole here, so we have a focus point which merges with the platform here. It's kind of good too. So I think it's better effect, but we can slightly decrease the brightness in the middle because it's now too exaggerated. Okay, that looks, I guess, much better. So let's merge these layers. So if I were to sharpen it here, what I would do is Ctrl J, duplicate, and go to filters, go to sharpen, and use smart sharpen. And then it's looks a bit ridiculous, I guess, now because it's already sharpened and too much sharpening. So it doesn't look natural anymore. So I think the sharpening at the Lightroom gave this effect. No, the noise reduction gave this pasteurized, maybe like painting looking effect. It's kind of exaggerated now. Maybe we use it too much, but the photo is kind of big that we don't really need to worry much. So let's use Smart Sharpen, Filter, Zoom out, and we can already view the preview. So the big image, pretty good, very significant improvement all around. So I'm gonna sharpen it here too. Let's keep it okay. So we can check with, without, with, without. So if it brings in some, so why this is splitted here now? I'm not also familiar with the fit screen. Okay, CS6, it's also new release. I don't know the controls yet much. So if you zoom in and see that it is kind of noisy here, what you can do to add a layer mask. So that is, you hold Alt and add a layer mask. This will be black first, then fill it with white. Alt backspace. Now it is white. Now we can paint in black to hide the sharpening. So I choose brush tool, clicking B, and the foreground should be black. Click X, that switches this to. Now I can paint in the area that looks too kind of noisy from this sharpening. I think that was more or less it, the sky and this horizon area. So zoom back. So now the sharpening is in the foreground. That's good. Let's merge these two. Shift click, choose, Control E, merge. I'm going to click Control S. This will save now the settings. Now it's saving actually to Lightroom. So this is this image is the data is from Lightroom, so it saves it there. We close this and now go back to Lightroom, and it will be here all updated with the save. So this was after our Lightroom modifications. Now we have with Photoshop local adjustments this. So if you kind of find this yellow area too strong, you can decrease it by going to yellow saturation and get a little bit more natural looking view. And if you mess around a little bit with this hue and saturation, you may be able to bring in some redness, which might look good actually. And here now we have the yellows. I can bring it back because now I kind of get rid of the most of the yellows. So try to keep it in a way natural looking. That looks okay, maybe a little bit exaggerated. Let's compare before, after. Actually, I like this effect better than this too yellowish. Maybe a little bit decrease it. No, that looks much better. Okay, I'm done. So I will just export it to use in my web page. I use 800 pixels. I will label this with the name of the photo, Pacifica, and let's give a name, the movement of the water, let's call it. And so it sharpens for screen. It's going to be my blog post, and then I right click and export it again, this time full size without decreasing the size. I write the same, type the same name at FS means full size, and there is no resizing of image, and it's sharpening for glossy paper. Export. We are done. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please watch the other ones, and let me know if you have any comments and feedbacks. Thank you.